My roommate in New York came out, and we lived this beautiful love. New York City, a place where millions of stories unfold every day. But mine began quietly, in a small apartment with a single window facing the noise of the street. I never expected that my roommate, someone I thought I simply shared bills and space with, would end up changing my entire life. What started as late-night conversations, takeout dinners on the couch, and laughter about nothing slowly turned into something deeper, something neither of us dared to name at first. That night, under the dim light of our kitchen, he finally told me the truth he had been carrying for so long. He came out to me, and in that moment, the air between us shifted forever. It wasn't just about his confession. It was about the way my heart responded, about the courage I found in myself to admit what I had been feeling too. This is not just a love story. It's a journey of discovery, fear, and the unexpected beauty of finding home in another person's presence. From friendship to an unspoken connection, and from hesitation to the kind of love that shakes the foundation of who you thought you were. This is our story. If you've ever wondered how love can surprise you in the most ordinary places, stay with me. Because what happened next is something I never imagined, and I promise you won't want to miss a single part of it. Subscribe now, turn on the notifications, and let yourself be pulled into this journey. By the end, you may find yourself asking, what if the person you've been searching for has been right beside you all along? New York never really sleeps, but in our apartment, the nights always felt strangely calm. The city I'm outside the window was constant, horns echoing, subway brakes screeching, the chatter of people spilling out from late-night bars. Inside, though, it was a different world. The walls were thin, the floorboards creaked with every step, but there was something about that place that felt like a sanctuary. Maybe it was because of him, because of Evan. When I first moved in, I thought Evan was just another Craigslist miracle, the kind of roommate who actually paid rent on time and didn't leave dirty dishes piled up in the sink. He was in his mid-20s, like me, tall with a head of messy dark hair that never seemed to fall the same way twice. He had this laid-back energy, like nothing could really faze him. But the more time we spent together, the more I realized there was something carefully guarded in him, like he was holding a secret just out of sight. At first, it was easy to ignore. We'd spend evenings watching reruns of sitcoms, eating greasy slices of pizza from the shop on the corner, or arguing about which subway line was the worst in the city. But little things started to pull at me, like the way his eyes softened when our laughter went on a beat too long, or how his shoulder would brush against mine when we both reached for the remote at the same time. None of it was intentional, but it left me awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why I couldn't stop replaying those tiny moments. I told myself it was nothing, just the side effect of living in close quarters with someone. Proximity, familiarity. But then there was that evening in December, when the heating broke down, and we were forced to bundle up under every blanket we owned. We sat on the couch, wrapped up together like kids at a sleepover, steam from our mugs of instant hot chocolate rising between us. His laughter echoed in my chest, warm despite the freezing apartment, and something shifted inside me. That was the night I knew, at least for myself, that this was more than friendship. The realization scared me. I'd been in relationships before, yes, but never like this. Never with someone who lived down the hall, who I'd see every morning brushing his teeth half asleep, who would know every crack in my routine. It felt dangerous, like standing too close to a ledge with no railing. One wrong move and everything, our friendship, our home, my comfort, could come crashing down. Still, the attraction grew. The way he'd sometimes lean against the doorframe while talking to me, casual but too close. The way his hand brushed mine when we passed plates across the table, and the way his eyes lingered when he thought I wasn't looking. Or maybe I just wanted to believe that. One night, I came home late from work, rain soaking through my jacket, and found him sitting on the floor of the living room, guitar in hand. He didn't hear me at first, too lost in the chords he was playing. His voice, low and husky, filled the apartment. I froze in the doorway, listening. There was a sadness in his song, something raw that made my throat tighten. When he finally looked up and noticed me, he stopped abruptly, almost embarrassed. "Didn't know you were home," he said softly, setting the guitar aside like he'd been caught. I tried to play it cool. "You never told me you could sing." "It's nothing," he shrugged, but there was a flush in his cheeks that told me it wasn't nothing at all. That moment hung heavy between us. I wanted to tell him how beautiful it had been, how it made me feel things I wasn't ready to say out loud. Instead, I just sat down beside him, close enough that our knees touched. We stayed like that, silent, the rain hammering against the window. The silence was louder than words. And I knew I couldn't keep pretending. Over the next week, my mind was a storm. I caught myself watching him more closely, memorizing the lines of his face, the way his hair fell into his eyes when he was concentrating. I started writing down what I wanted to say to him, then ripping the pages into shreds before I could lose my nerve. But one evening, it became too much. We were sitting in the kitchen, the only light coming from the bulb above the stove. Evan was scrolling through his phone, half listening to the music playing from the speaker. I watched him laugh at something on the screen, his lips curling into that familiar crooked smile, and I realized this was it. If I didn't take the chance now, I might never. I took a breath, my heart hammering like it wanted out of my chest. "Evan," I said, my voice unsteady. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "What's up?" Everything I had rehearsed vanished. All the carefully chosen words, the safety nets I'd built in my head, gone. I just blurted out the truth. "I can't stop thinking about you." The words were out before I could pull them back. The room seemed to shrink, the silence stretching unbearably between us. His phone slipped from his hand, landing softly on the table. His expression froze, unreadable, and my stomach twisted. Finally, he leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on mine. His voice was low, careful, but it cut through me like glass. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into. You don't know what you're getting yourself into." Those words echoed in my head like the clang of a church bell, loud and impossible to ignore. Evan's eyes were fixed on me, intense and almost guarded, as if he had just revealed something he wasn't sure he should have said. My heart was still racing, my palms sweating on the surface of the kitchen table. But I couldn't look away. "What do you mean?" I asked, tried to keep my voice steady, though I felt the tremor behind it. Evan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his hand over his face. For a moment, he seemed older, worn down by something unseen. I don't want you to regret saying that, or regret being near me." It was such a strange thing to hear from him. This was a guy who always cracked jokes when things got tense, who always seemed so sure of himself. To hear him sound almost fragile, it unsettled me. "I wouldn't regret it," I said, more firmly than I felt. "I couldn't." His lips pressed together, and he looked away, his gaze fixed on the dark window over the sink. The city lights flickered faintly through the glass, like a reminder that life outside our tiny bubble kept moving. "You don't know everything about me," he said quietly. "And if you did, maybe you wouldn't feel the same way." I hated the weight in his voice. It wasn't rejection, not exactly, it was hesitation. It was as if he wanted to hold me close and push me away at the same time. And that, more than anything, left me spinning. I stood up and walked toward the sink, just to break the tension. I could feel his eyes on me as I filled a glass of water, the silence suffocating. When I turned back, he was still staring, his expression unreadable. "Then tell me," I said finally, "tell me what it is you think I don't know." For a second, I thought he might. His mouth opened slightly, his hand gripping the edge of the table like he needed something to anchor him. But then he shook his head and stood up, brushing past me. "Not tonight," he muttered, heading down the hall toward his room. The slam of his door was soft, but it felt like thunder. I stood there for what felt like forever, glass still in hand, staring at the empty space he'd left behind. My confession hung in the air unanswered, and I didn't know whether to feel relieved that I had finally said it, or crushed by the way he had walked away. The following days were a blur. We moved around each other like ghosts, polite but distant. Our usual routine, ordering Chinese takeout, watching late-night shows, even arguing about laundry, fell apart. It was like a wall had grown between us overnight. And every time I saw him, every time I heard his door creak open or his footsteps in the hallway, I felt the ache of everything unsaid. But then something changed. It was a Saturday morning, cold and gray, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with a half-empty cup of coffee, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. Evan came in, still in his pajamas, hair sticking up in every direction. He didn't say anything at first, just went straight for the coffee pot. But then he stopped, leaning against the counter, staring at me. "About the other night," he said, his voice low. My chest tightened. "Yeah." He set his mug down, hands resting on the counter like he needed the support. "I wasn't trying to push you away. I wasn't ready for it." "Ready for what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His eyes lifted to meet mine, and for the first time, I saw something raw in them. Vulnerability, fear, and maybe, just maybe, hope. "To be honest with you," he said, "to admit who I really am." The room felt impossibly still, the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound. My pulse roared in my ears. "You don't have to hide from me," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Not anymore." Evan exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "You make it sound so simple. Maybe it doesn't have to be complicated." For the first time in days, a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. But it didn't last long. His gaze dropped again, and he rubbed the back of his neck. "There are people in my life who wouldn't understand. People who'd walk away if they knew." "Then let them," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." The silence that followed was heavy, but different this time. Not suffocating. Charged. I could feel something shifting between us, like a door opening just a crack. And then, unexpectedly, he stepped closer. His hand brushed against mine on the table, the lightest touch. But it sent a shock through me. His eyes searched mine, hesitant, as though asking permission without words. "Why me?" he asked suddenly. The question startled me. "What do you mean?" "Out of everyone in this city, why me?" I swallowed hard, the answer rising in my throat. "Because you're the only one who makes me feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." His breath caught, and for a moment, it felt like the world outside that apartment disappeared. But just as quickly, the spell broke. The sharp buzz of his phone cut through the air, and he pulled back, fumbling to check the screen. His face shifted instantly, all traces of vulnerability wiped clean. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, his grip on the phone almost trembling. Finally, he muttered, "I have to go." Something came up. Before I could respond, he was already grabbing his jacket and heading toward the door. I followed him into the hallway, confused and anxious. "Evan, wait, what's going on?" He paused, his back to me, hand on the doorknob. When he finally turned, his expression was conflicted, torn between the desire to explain and the instinct to hide. "I'll tell you later," he said quickly, then pulled the door open and disappeared into the bustling street. I stood there, staring at the door he'd left swinging behind him, my heart pounding with new fear, because I realized then, whatever secret he was carrying, it wasn't just about us. It was something bigger, something that could change everything. I didn't sleep the night he left. The apartment felt too big without his presence, every sound magnified. The drip of the faucet, the hum of the radiator, the distant sirens outside. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying his words over and over. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." I want to believe I did, but the truth was I didn't. Not really. Around dawn, I gave up trying to rest. I made coffee, sat at the table, and stared at the steam curling from mug. The city was waking up. Traffic horns outside, footsteps in the hallway. But I felt suspended, like time had slowed down just for me. That's when the door finally opened. Evan stepped inside, hair damp from the drizzle, eyes tired like he'd spent the whole night running from something. When he saw me sitting there, his shoulders tensed. He set his keys on the counter, avoiding my gaze. "You're up early," he said quietly. "I never went to sleep," I admitted. "Where were you?" He hesitated, then poured himself a glass of water. "I had to deal with something." "That's not an answer," I pressed. He sighed, leaning against the counter. "It's complicated." The distance between us wasn't measured in feet, but in all the things we weren't saying. I wanted to ask more, to push, but the look on his face told me he wasn't ready. Instead, I just nodded, though the silence burned inside me. For the next couple of days, we floated around each other like strangers. No late-night shows, no takeout dinners. Just polite greetings and closed doors. It hurt more than I expected, and the longer it went on, the more unbearable it became. Finally, on Saturday morning, the tension snapped. I was scrolling absently on my phone when he walked in, still in sweatpants, hair sticking up in every direction. He poured coffee, then paused, leaning against the counter. "About the other night," he said, his voice low. I set my phone down. "Yeah." He rubbed the back of his neck, staring at the floor. "I wasn't trying to push you away. I just wasn't ready." "Ready for what?" "To admit who I am." He looked up, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, not of me, but of himself. I swallowed, my chest tightening. "You don't have to hide from me." A flicker of a smile touched his lips, then faded. "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it doesn't have to be complicated," I said. For a moment, he just looked at me, his expression softening. Then he took a step closer, close enough that our arms nearly touched. My pulse raced. "Why me?" he asked suddenly. "What?" "Out of everyone in this city, why do you care so much about me?" The answer came without hesitation. "Because when I'm around you, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He froze, staring at me like he wanted to believe it, but couldn't quite let himself. His hand brushed mine on the table, just for a second, but the spark was undeniable. My breath caught, and I saw the same reaction flash across his face. We might have stayed there forever, caught in that electric pause, if not for the sharp buzz of his phone. The sound shattered everything. He glanced at the screen, and in an instant, the softness disappeared. His jaw clenched. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. "Evan, wait!" I stood, following him. "What's going on?" He paused at the door, his hand on the knob. For a second, I thought he might finally let me in, but then he shook his head. "I'll tell you later." And just like that, he was gone, the door slamming shut behind him. I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, staring at the empty space he'd left. This wasn't just about us anymore. Whatever secret he was carrying, it was bigger, and for the first time, I was terrified that it might tear us apart before we ever had the chance to begin. The apartment felt emptier after he left, though his jacket was still hanging by the door, his guitar leaning against the wall, his mug half finished on the counter. It wasn't just the absence of his body. It was the absence of answers. Every time I thought I was getting closer to him, something pulled him away, and I was left with more questions than I could hold. Hours passed before I heard his footsteps again in the hallway. I opened my door just as he was sliding his key into the lock. He looked startled, like he'd been caught. "You're still up?" he asked, voice careful. "I couldn't exactly relax," I said. "Not when you storm out like that, and don't tell me where you're going." He lowered his eyes. "Guilty. I know. I'm sorry. I wanted to stay angry, to demand the truth, but the exhaustion on his face softened me." He walked past me into the apartment and tossed his phone onto the couch like it had betrayed him. "Talk to me, Evan," I said, following him. "What's going on?" He sat down, elbows on his knees, hands pressed together. It took him a while to look at me. When he finally did, his eyes carried something heavy. "It's my dad," he said. "He knows." The words landed like a stone in my chest. "Knows what?" I asked, though I already suspected. "About me, about who I am, about us, or at least about how I feel about you." His voice cracked at the end, but he forced it steady again. "My sister told him she thought I liked someone, and he put the pieces together. He called me last night. That's why I had to leave." I sat beside him, trying to process. "And what did he say?" Evan laughed bitterly. "That I should remember who I am. That there are expectations. That I need to stop embarrassing the family." He rubbed his face hard with both hands. "It's the same thing he's been drilling into me since I was a kid. Keep your head down. Be the son he wants, not the one I am." Anger rose in me, sharp and protective. You don't owe him that. You don't owe anyone that. I wish it were that easy, Evan whispered. But when your entire family is tied up in image, in tradition, in appearances, it's not just about me anymore. If I step out of line, I take everyone with me. At least that's how he makes it sound. I wanted to tell him none of that mattered, that his happiness should come first. But I could see the fear in his eyes, fear of being abandoned, of being unloved by the people who were supposed to stand by him no matter what. That kind of fear wasn't something words could erase overnight. Evan, I said softly, you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here. He looked at me like he wanted to believe me, but his mouth tightened, holding back. We sat in silence until the radiator hissed, filling the room with its uneven rhythm. He finally leaned back, closing his eyes. I don't know if I'm strong enough, he admitted. Then let me be strong with you, I said. His eyes opened, locking onto mine. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt, like we were standing on a precipice together. Then he reached out, his hand brushing mine, hesitant but real. The sound of a knock at the door jolted us both. Evan stiffened instantly, withdrawing his hand. Who the hell? I stood and opened it. Our landlord, Super, was in the hall, a stack of envelopes under his arm. Morning, he said gruffly, handing me one. Management asked me to drop these off. Thanks, I said, closing the door with unease. The envelope was thick and official-looking. I slid a finger under the seal and pulled out a sheet of paper. My eyes scanned the bold letters in the middle. Notice to vacate, 30 days. My throat went dry. Evan, I handed it to him. He read it, his jaw tightening. They're raising the rent again. We can't afford it. The panic in his voice was new, raw. We'll figure it out, I said quickly. We'll find another place. Do you know how hard it is to get an apartment in this city? His voice was sharp, almost desperate. First and last month's rent, deposits, background checks. And with my family breathing down my neck, he broke off, pacing. I stood frozen, the weight of everything crashing over me. My confession, his father's judgment, and now the roof over our heads slipping away. The fragile balance we'd been clinging to was cracking. Evan finally stopped pacing and turned to me, his chest rising and falling. What if this is it? He asked. What if the universe is telling us we're not supposed to? He trailed off, but the unspoken word, B, lingered in the air. I stepped closer, forcing him to meet my eyes. Don't you dare say that. Don't you dare give up on us before we've even started. He stared at me, torn, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His eyes glistened, though he tried to hide it. I'm scared, he admitted, his voice barely audible. So am I said. But that doesn't mean we run. It means we fight. The air between us was thick, every emotion pressing down. I wanted to reach for him, to erase the distance, but I didn't know if he'd let me. Then the building hallway erupted with noise, voices raised, neighbors opening their doors, waving the same notices we'd just received. The entire floor was alive with panic. Evan and I stood side by side, listening to the chaos. The knock of reality was louder than anything we'd shared so far. And as he turned to me, eyes wide with fear and something else I couldn't name, I realized this wasn't just about us anymore. Whatever was coming next, it was going to test us both in ways we weren't ready for. The building never sounded the same after that night. Our neighbors' voices echoed to the thin walls, frustration and fear spilling into the hallways. Everyone had received the same letter. 30 days. 30 days to pack up entire lives and find somewhere else to land. New York was merciless that way. One moment you thought you belonged, and the next you were reminded that nothing was permanent. Evan and I stood in our kitchen. The paper spread between us like a cruel joke. Neither of us touched it. Neither of us knew what to say. For days, we moved around the apartment with an invisible weight pressing us down. Every corner, whispered memories. Late-night Pete's on the couch, broken radiator laughter, the soft hum of the guitar filling the silence. All of it felt fragile now, as if the walls themselves were mourning with us. But somewhere inside the panic, something shifted. Losing our apartment made every second feel urgent. Every word unsaid, every touch avoided. It all seemed unbearable now. if we had only 30 days. I refused to spend them in silence. One evening, I found Evan sitting on the floor of his room, boxes half packed around him. His guitar was across his lap, but his hands weren't moving. He was staring at the strings like they held answers. "You're not playing," I said softly, leaning against the doorframe. He looked up, startled, then gave me a half smile. Didn't feel like I had a song in me tonight. "Then let me be the song," I said before I could stop myself. He blinked, processing my words. "You don't give up, do you?" "Not on you," I said. That was the moment his wall cracked. He set the guitar aside and pulled me to the floor beside him. For the first time, he didn't hesitate. He didn't guard himself. His hand slipped into mine, warm and trembling, and he whispered the truth he had buried under layers of fear. "I'm tired of hiding," he admitted. "I'm tired of being afraid of what everyone else thinks. I like you. I've liked you for longer than I want to admit, and I can't pretend anymore." The confession hit me like light, breaking through clouds. My chest tightened, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. I reached up, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, and whispered back, "Then don't. Not with me." When our lips finally met, it wasn't like in the movies. No swelling music, no perfect choreography. It was real messy, urgent. His hand cupped the side of my face, pulling me closer, as if he was afraid I'd vanish. I melted into him, tasting salt from tears neither of us realized had fallen. When we pulled apart, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was full, alive. He rested his forehead against mine and laughed softly. Of all the places to fall in love, I never thought it'd be this tiny apartment. "New York has a way of surprising people," I said, smiling. For the next week, we lived like the 30-day clock didn't matter. We made breakfast together every morning, traded stories until dawn, filled every corner of the apartment with laughter and touches we had denied ourselves for so long. The world outside was still crumbling, rent hikes, expectations, family pressure. But inside those walls, we carved out something that felt unshakable. Then one night, his phone rang again. His father. I saw the name flash on the screen, saw the fear flicker in Evan's eyes. He almost didn't answer, but I touched his hand and nodded. This time he picked up. I couldn't hear the words on the other end, but I could hear Evan's voice, steady, clear, unwavering. He didn't argue, didn't shout. He simply said, "This is who I am, and if you can't accept that, I won't apologize anymore." When he hung up, he was shaking. I pulled him into my arms, holding him until his breath slowed. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and whispered, "I don't know what's going to happen with them." "You know what's happening with me," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." And I meant it. On our last night in the apartment, surrounded by boxes, we sat on the floor with takeout containers and cheap wine. The radiator clanked one final time, like it was saying goodbye. Evan strummed his guitar softly, and I leaned against him, memorizing every second. "I used to think love was something I'd have to fight against my whole life," he said quietly. "But with you, it feels like something worth fighting for." I kissed his shoulder, my voice low. "Then let's fight. Together." We didn't know where we'd end up. Maybe in another cramped apartment across the city. Maybe in a neighborhood we'd never dreamed of. But for the first time, uncertainty didn't terrify me, because I wasn't facing it alone. As we fell asleep on the floor, our fingers intertwined, I realized something important. Love isn't about waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect place or the perfect family approval. It's about choosing someone over and over, even when the world feels like it's against you. And in that choice, I discovered not just him, but myself. Sometimes life tears the floor out from under us, whether the notice on the door, a father's disapproval, or the fear of admitting who we are. But in those cracks, we often find the truth we've been hiding from. So I ask you, what are you running from in your own life? What conversation have you been too afraid to start? What love have you been too afraid to admit? If this story made you feel something, remember, courage doesn't mean the fear disappears. It means choosing anyway. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you can keep following stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us all the power of love.